Good morning, or it might be afternoon, wherever you are today. We are starting with our day 1 to our 9-day challenge, just making sure everything is working. And for those who know me very well, you'll know that my voice is not sounding the way that it usually does. That is because I broke my golden rule, which is to rest and have a timetable and commitment that suits me as the introvert, and I pushed myself. So I happened to lose my voice, but as they say, the show goes on, and I'm so looking forward to spending the next 9 days with you all, whether you are joining me live in the Zoom room. And if you're not sure on how to join me live on the Zoom room, so we get to hang out after the presentation for some more Q&A if my voice lasts, then the link will be here somewhere, but it's industrythoughtleaderacademy.com/invisible to influential. All right. So if you're only just joining me today and you don't know much about me, I'll share a little bit of my journey and my story throughout today's presentation. I'm going to share my screen. As I mentioned, this is day 1 of how to go from invisible to influential, trusted authority with a podcast, even if you're in a crowded marketplace. And today's episode, or today's day 1 workshop, if you want to call it a workshop, is really looking at how to go from underpaid coach or a consultant. Some of you may be doing both. You've got a coaching business, working with clients, but you're also doing some consulting as well, to a highly paid, sought after, trusted authority. Now, you're in the right place if you're in the beginning business of building your business, but you've got no idea how to position yourself and your message in the marketplace. And you are in a crowded marketplace if you have a think about all of the other coaches and maybe even consultants who are working in the same space as you. Maybe you're bringing years of corporate experience into your coaching or consulting practice, but you don't know the best way yet to showcase your diverse expertise into a concise and compelling message. And for those of you who do know me, you've heard me share before, and I know many of you can relate to this. You've got multifaceted interests. You love learning. You enroll in a lot of courses in personal and professional development, and bringing all of that together in your diverse, rich toolkit that you can work with clients can get a little bit confusing. And some of the people may be saying to you, well, what are you doing today? And how are you helping people? And kind of putting that all into one great statement on how you can help people can get a bit confusing for you. Maybe you've been in business a while, you're just not generating the results or the visibility that you would like, or that you know that you should be getting. You feel like the world's best kept secret. If that perfectly describes you, you've been thinking about launching a podcast to build your reach and your reputation as that trusted authority, as well as your revenue, generating leads from your podcast, nurturing them from your first episode, but you just don't know where to start. You are in the right place. Now, I speak quickly. I have a lot to cover. I am hoping that I'm not going to have a voice that just completely disappears. Don't be overwhelmed, though, from what I'm sharing today and across every consecutive day, which builds on each other. So if you are watching, say, day 2 or day 3, or you're not able to make day 2 live, come back and watch it, because it's going to build on from what we covered today. My goal is to empower you to share what you may not know already, so that you have an idea on what you have to have in place. So my goal is to empower you to help to identify those gaps and areas of opportunity and learning and growth. And for some of you, you might be thinking, yep, I've got that in place. So that's working really well too. You can tick that off your box. You don't have to focus on this. But this is really a big picture overview. Now, how to get the best of this 9-day event, turn off other distractions. I know you hear that over and over again, so I certainly don't want to repeat what you know is true. You know, I learned years ago that multitasking was not really a good thing when I accidentally deleted my website while I was updating my website, just doing a few little, things which I really should have got my team to do for me. I was on the phone doing some other things, looking around, and that big red button that said, are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Well, multitasking, you want to focus to get the best. Also, too, I am going to be announcing this $10,000 scholarship for a new program that I am launching. For some of you, this is going to be a great fit for where you're at the moment to help you achieve that next level of success, significance in your business and for you as well. So industrythoughtleaderacademy.com/invisible to influential to find out more about this 9-day event, because we will be sharing this across a few other platforms as well, the recording. So if you are catching the recording, go and to that link, grab the action guide and find out more about the scholarship, which I'll be sharing in a moment. Commit to your success. I'm going to run through this quickly. Act as if you've paid for this event. I have often been told by people who've attended various 5-day events or 9-day events as this one, that they received far more value from this free event than they actually paid and invested for a specialist. And that's what I do, because you need to know these things. And I'm sharing what I've learned along the way to help you avoid all of the mistakes that I have made. And if it seems like a good fit and the next step that perhaps, you might working with me in some of my programs, then that's fantastic. Would love to have a chat to see if you're a good fit. Leave any self-doubt behind, comparison, all of those things. Just leave those behind. Imposter syndrome, you're where you are today because the journey, the things that you have done have led you right here. And I don't believe that it's by accident that you're here on this 9-day challenge. Leverage the workbook, the action guide, write down your top questions. And of course, always important, be inspired. What is that one takeaway that you can take away to implement that one aha? And by the way, that one aha where you're inspired, you've learned something differently, you've challenged maybe a belief that you've had, keep that in mind, because that's something that you want to put down a little bit later when I'm sharing how to be in the running for the $10,000 scholarship. If you've got any questions, I know there's some of you in Zoom here. At the end of the training, we'll leave some time for Q&A. As I mentioned earlier, my voice has decided to go on me. I'm glad that I actually am able to speak, because yesterday I was saying to my husband, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the call. It has been a very silent weekend, which my husband has been very grateful for. But anyway, we will keep going. The show goes on. So if you do like prizes, I've already hinted, it's the scholarship to my Invisible to Influential Trusted Authority with a Podcast 12-month acceleration program valued at $10,000. I'll share more at the end of today's workshop, how you can be in the running. Now, 2 common questions that I'm often asked about podcasting, and these are in the order that I'm often asked these. Where do I start, Anne-Marie, and what microphone should I get? And if that's what's led you here today, then something that I was asked by one of the change makers right here inside our Podcasting with Purpose community, she asked me, are there any differences between podcasting and podcasting as a business owner, as a coach, as a consultant, a service-based expert who is bringing your knowledge to a podcast so that you can build a relationship with your audience, who I'm assuming is your ideal client, so that you can continue to build know, like, and trust. And eventually that listener, that audience member will join your community, start stalking you across all other platforms. And then when you have that call to action at the right time, when they're ready, that they will step forward. And so I said, a great question, Michelle. And the answer is yes, yes, yes. To leverage a podcast as a service-based business, as an expert, a trusted authority, to build your reach with your ideal client, your reputation as that influential, trusted authority, as well as revenue, nurturing your listeners into leads, inquiries, and ultimately paying customers. When you think launching a podcast is pretty simple, isn't it? We've got a device, we've got lots of technology, far more technology at our fingertips now than when I first started back in 2008, that's for sure. But whilst it's relatively simple, if we compare launching a podcast to launching a business, starting a business is relatively simple these days too, isn't it? But building a business that's profitable, that attracts your ideal clients, that enables you to sustain your energy, because many of us are working one-on-one with clients, aren't we? The way we generate income is to share knowledge, and we don't want to burn out. We don't want to undercharge, all of those things. as a coach. And so there's a difference between building a business that you're going to get paid what you're worth. You're going to attract the high-level clients who value your worth, value your expertise, and value paying and investing in themselves through investing in your programs and packages. There's a difference. And just like building a business, a coaching practice, a consulting practice takes foundations, core business foundations, I call them. There's foundations for your podcast as well. And I'm going to be sharing those foundations in this 9-day challenge. And that's exactly what I just said. We'll be focusing on that. The robust strategy, along with the clarity around your message, your brand, your offerings, to ensure that you can build a profitable, scalable business. Otherwise, your podcast just becomes this incredible tool that you're using, but it's not generating any results. I've been in that situation, and I certainly don't want you being in that situation either. You can monetize your podcast by generating leads and clients. Monetize your message before you monetize someone else's. That's what I'll often say, because people often assume that to monetize, you need to get sponsors and advertisers, which is certainly one way, but it's not that best way if you're wanting to really benefit and generate some great results. So that's what we're going to talk about. Just briefly, my story: global financial crisis in 2008. I was working in the career industry, and a colleague and I were so disillusioned at the doom and gloom that mainstream media was portraying across every platform. We knew things were difficult. We knew things had certainly changed, and there were people around the world. I had some contracts with a US job board, and the people that I had speaking and coaching with and working with, it was tough. It was tough, but we knew things were not hopeless. We knew people needed to change their approach to job search. It would take a little bit longer. There were so many different things that my colleague and I wanted to share with them to enable them to have hope and to start changing their approach to job search. So that's exactly what we did. We produced the show for 2 years, Career Success Radio. But one of the reasons we stopped production was because we struggled to monetize it. We assumed that we would create a message, we would get great guests on the show, we would share our own expertise throughout each of the various episodes, and we assumed that people would hear us and then think, I want to work with Keith, I want to work with Anne-Marie. We had separate businesses too. There's a lot of learnings within that. We hired mentors, but we didn't have any success, because back then the mentors that we hired had come from mainstream radio. And what I realize now, almost 13, 14 years actually on, mainstream radio is very different to podcasting. The audience that we attract, the ability to build know, like, and trust far quicker, deeper level of engagement when you get the right things in place. So we ended the show after 2 years, great connections. We built our influence and impact, but there was no income there. And that's what I hear a lot of people are struggling with as well. They've got impact, they've got influence, but the income, not so much. So fast forward a number of years later, I have what I now call my worst business failure ever. I'm sure we all have those as entrepreneurs, don't we? In fact, we've probably got a number of different situations and challenges and so forth that we could kind of label a failure. One thing, just note to self, there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. It's something that I learned during one of my many trainings that I did, feedback that could really help you. But anyway, after that worst business failure ever, I thought to myself, because that was a doozy. That was something that really shook me to the core. And I knew that I needed to take a step back and deal with it, because it had the ability to change who I was. It had the ability to cause what I call, as we know as coaches, if we don't deal with something, if we don't go through the forgiveness process, it can continue to be a thorn in your side that will stop you from really moving forward. And so I launched Women in Leadership podcast as a way to deal with my grief and loss. I thought, I can't create, I can't put two words together. I don't even really know what I'm going to be doing. I just need to take some time out. But I do know that I can ask great questions, and I'm going to surround myself with incredible women who have gone what I've gone through. And I'm just going to ask them questions. How did they get through that? What are they doing? All of that. So unbeknownst to them, I started that podcast as a way to deal with my grief and loss. And I accidentally generated 2 4-figure clients with 3 episodes on my website that I had for a podcast to deal with my grief and loss. And it wasn't until many years later that I thought, if I could recreate what needed to be possible for 2 women who knew absolutely nothing about me, but who Googled branding and business coach, which was what I was doing at the time, come to my website, have a look around, listen to the 3 episodes and make a decision. We want to work with Anne-Marie, and then ring me. And then at that time, I was able to give them the best package to suit their needs. What would be possible? So a book, a program later, influential, podcasting for coaches and consultants was born. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. So everything that I learned along the way through trial and error, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, I'm sharing today. So you do not need to make the same mistake. And today I now have a podcast network, Ambitious Entrepreneur Network, which houses 3 podcasts that I produce for that network. Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, which is my award-winning show, Women in Leadership podcast, which I just explained to you about. That was the runner-up. So they were both head-to-head in the awards, and AES ended up taking up the award. And then the Christian Entrepreneurs podcast too. The reason I'm sharing this is not to say you need to have 3 podcasts. Please don't model that. I just love this space. I am an introvert through and through. In fact, I realize that I'm more of an introvert than I realize I am. And so when I push my peopling, this is what happens. My voice, I lose my voice and I end up my adrenal gland. I just need to rest. And so this allows me to learn, because I am able to, engage with incredible guests who share their knowledge. So I'm able to learn. I'm able to share that message through my podcast, and I'm able to network in the way that I love networking. I love to find out more about people. So podcasting for me that way allows me to build those deeper connections. But why I also share this is you just never know where your voice ends up. The Christian Entrepreneurs podcast was syndicated on a local radio station here in Western Australia. An Ambitious Entrepreneur podcast was syndicated on an international radio show in Zimbabwe. And Women in Leadership podcast, many years ago. Well, actually, it was another one of my podcasts that I had, a Coaches Connection podcast, was syndicated and included in a coaching magazine. So you can get in front of your ideal clients. You just don't know where your voice ends up and who it impacts. Podcasting is an incredible space. And Ambitious Entrepreneur Show is often mentioned in the top shows, and 15 best entrepreneur podcasts to boost business growth is just one of them. Over the last little while, you just never know where your voice ends up. And I'm sharing that because I know some of you have reached out and have said, I'm not really sure if anyone wants to listen to my story, wants to really listen. Who will listen? And I know there's a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of comparison syndrome going on for us as well. And this is something that I'm sharing too. The Australian Women Podcast's #1, Business Women Australia, was listed. And Business Women Australia is a podcast that I host and I produce for Business Women Australia across Australia. And their podcast strategy is when they have a premium member, we'll interview them and we'll share that across the platform. And if they don't have a premium member, we don't interview. And I share that because there are no rules to podcasting other than the rules you set yourself. And the rules will depend on the outcome that you want, where you're at in your business, your time, commitment, all of those different things. So what's right for someone may not necessarily be right for you and your business model. So there are no #1 rules. There are things that you can put into place, absolutely. But I'm just sharing that so that, if you're wanting to learn the #1 secret, I can share you all of the things that worked for me. But my strategy, but you need to think of those things that fits in with you too, your story, your journey, who are my ideal clients, where am I using this in the customer journey? All of those things need to be considered. So the things that you want to start thinking about is, am I ready to start a podcast yet? Or do I need to focus on some things first? So here are 3 indicators that maybe you need to just hold off and start to work on this first. Firstly, your message isn't cutting through the noise. So if I hear someone that says to me, well, Anne-Marie, I've heard podcasting is a great way to amplify my message, and so that's why I'm starting a podcast. And I hear, well, what are you doing with your current marketing? Well, I'm doing this, this, and this, but it's just not landing. It's just not cutting through the noise. That rings alarm bells for me, because if your message isn't cutting through the noise already in how you're sharing your message, and you launch a podcast with the same message, you're just going to amplify the message that's not already working to many more people. So you're going to have an even greater, a bigger audience, I should say, with more people who are unsure about what you do. So focus on your message first. You'll hear that time and time again. Number two, you're not sure on your niche. And I'm sure you've heard that over and over. The riches are in the niches. We call them niche here. But you need to know, where are you putting your flag in the sand to say, this is the space that I want to own. This is where I want to start to speak into. This is where I want to really position myself as that influential, trusted authority. If you're not sure on the topic and in the marketplace, the small demographic of marketplace that you want to really focus on, then they're not going to be sure about it either. So get some clarity around that first. I'm just working with someone at the moment has finally found where she really wants to start to bring the voice. And so one of the things that we do is we're working on her message offering at the moment, is to start sharing some of that across social, and it exploded. And so people were commenting and saying, yeah, that is so true. And when a conversation happens like that, you know you're in the right place and your message is really landing well. And so that's why for her it was a great indication, yep, this is where I'm supposed to really be and support clients. And number three, you're not sure on the end in mind. The end in mind is very much thinking about your business model, who you support, the programs that you offer, and where best you need to focus your attention when you think about the customer journey. I'll give you an example. I was speaking to a company over in the UK, and they said to me, look, if we were to incorporate a podcast in the marketing that we're doing, we don't necessarily need to get a lot of new business. It's because we only take on 4 new clients every single year. And we know that with those 4 clients, if we do a really good job in the first 12 months, that client will continue to be a high level client for many years to come, being multiple 6-figure, business contracts to them each client. So for them, if they looked at the customer journey, it was not really to bring new leads in, but rather to incorporate a podcast that would have been best suited to really nurture the relationship with those existing customers who were onboarded in that 12 months, to really sow into them, so that at the end of that 12 months, that podcast was so strongly leveraged in the work that they were doing that it was an easy yes for those 4 clients to go, we want to become long-term clients. So that would have best suited for them. Others of you would like to have a podcast that creates more of an engagement with new leads rather than, your existing customer base. Some of you may do both. You might have a podcast that is very much out in the open, where you're really nurturing those listeners into leads from a cold. They're not necessarily knowing you yet they're searching. And then you may also incorporate a podcast that is just for members only, just for clients. So you keep that content private. So you see, it depends. What's your end in mind? Where best can you focus the podcast strategy to really nurture those listeners into leads? And only you will know that once you incorporate and you have a look at your business structure and where you want to go. Let's have a look at these 4 podcasting truths. Your microphone and technology will make the difference in having a successful podcast. Get the best microphone and your podcast will be a success. Not so, because as I always say, message before microphone, because you cannot edit and mix compelling content that converts, that nurtures your ideal client along that customer journey, building know, like, and trust from fluff and banter, even if it was recorded on the most expensive microphone. And you may have heard me say that over and over again, and it is so true. reminding you that it's so important to have that message land, because you can use a microphone. For years, I used a Logitech microphone. And so while I'm not saying that the audio, if it's too distracting, then people aren't going to listen. But if you've got just a microphone that captures, without any distractions in the background, you can do that on a Logitech headset. I did that for years. You don't necessarily need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars. The message is way more important than microphone. The second podcasting mistruth, where they say your podcast will be a success, just publish it and clients will come. And as I mentioned earlier with Career Success Radio, that's exactly what we assume too. We got lots of great feedback from our podcast. Love your content, love that, love listening to you. But that wasn't generating any business. And so I hear that time and time again. We've launched our podcast. We continue to put a lot of money into it, yet we haven't really seen any returns. What are we missing? And it could be a number of things that I share today, and obviously ongoing in the next 9 days that we're going to spend together. So keep an eye out and an ear out to listen and watch to see, hey, maybe I need to really focus on this first before I launch that podcast. The third podcasting mistruth is this one. How do I get on new and noteworthy, Anne-Marie? Because I know that when that happens, my podcast is going to be a success. And to that I say, wrong. Vanity numbers are misleading. Sure, it's wonderful to get, to get listed, but I've heard time and time again of colleagues who've had lots of podcasts or have had podcasts with lots of downloads that have actually had to walk away because they didn't realize that it would be a real big success, but it wasn't really focused on their business model. It didn't focus on the customer journey, so that because it was two businesses that came together, they were talking about a particular topic that wasn't really focused on each other's business. Each business had a completely different focus altogether. So again, you think of your podcast as a vehicle, it's a brand communication tool, just one of the tools where you're building that relationship. And, if the step between getting off your podcast and onto your list, and as you're nurturing them, there's a disconnection there, people are just not going to make that step. Even if you do a call to action, it's going to feel a bit off actually, because, the content that you're sharing, the expertise that you're sharing is quite different from your business and what you're offering. And, I would say focus on building reputation equity so that you're seen as a trusted authority, an influential trusted authority. And I'm going to share with you my podcasting positioning quadrant shortly. Are you a trusted authority? And are you working your way up to that with the foundations you're putting into place? So I would much rather you have a smaller number of downloads, but those downloads are your ideal clients. They're engaging with your content. When you're sharing a call to action, which you do regularly, it's done in a way that it really is an expression of, hey, if this is something you're struggling with, I've got something that will help you. And they then take that next step. You'll generate so many results, far more results than just having, millions of downloads of people who are not really your ideal client and would never move forward. And the last mistruth is, hey, just press record, start talking. We've got some good questions to ask. And we're going to assume that these questions that we're asked are really going to create the content that is going to nurture that listener along the buyer's journey, along the customer journey. And if you compare your podcast to mainstream radio, where it's kind of like a chat show, it's not really the right approach if you're looking to build thought leadership and ultimately your business. And compelling conversations to what I call endless chatter to enhance that listener experience, that compelling conversation. There are certain things, language that you use, certain keywords, key phrases, those sorts of things you need to be really mindful of so that your podcast becomes a must listen to. And for you too, as the podcast host, there are reasons why people will listen to your podcast versus many other hundreds and hundreds of thousands of podcasts who are in your space because of you. All right, let's go briefly through these podcasting mistakes. And then I want to switch to the message, because as I mentioned, message before microphone. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit further today. But I'm sharing all of these mistakes and mistruths because some of you are also listening who've got a podcast and who are asking, why is my podcast not generating the results that I wanted? And it's probably because one or more of these things that we're talking about today isn't in place. And so then we're going to go through and start to share and talk about what you need to focus on, just to tweak slightly, or maybe for some of you who are starting from scratch, you'll know exactly the blueprint that you want to follow. Now, each of these 7 things are important individually, but together, so collectively, they're crucial. So if you miss the mark in one or more, it's going to impact everything. For instance, number 1 mistake is having an unclear or incorrect strategy for you when you look at your message and you look at your monetization strategy for your needs, your business model, and stage of business growth. That's really important. And so then you'll see that the next one, not having a lucrative niche, builds on that. If your strategy is incorrect, all of these other things are not going to matter. So you have to have that right strategy first. No lucrative niche. Do you know who your ideal client is? Do you know what keeps him or her up at night? Do you know the key phrases? And one of the things that I shared in a video, and I'm often saying to clients, if you're sharing the same message that you shared 2 years ago, your message needs to evolve. Because I'm sure that what's happened over the last 2 years has had your ideal client rethink what they're doing, probably brought up more challenges, more pressing challenges and problems that they need to deal with before they deal with, say, the bigger picture that you handled. So your message needs to change as well. Far more competition now as well online, because so many coaches and consultants are now going online. Your clients are more often online now too, which is a good thing, but you've got more noise. So you have to be even clearer with your message. Very important. And that leads to mistake number 3, being unclear. If you were to be asked, where do you want to position yourself? What is your trusted authority in, or where do you want to build your reputation as that trusted authority in? If you can't define that and define it with a message that really underpins that, then that's what you want to focus on, so that you're really clear on that and you can say it at the, if someone were to ask you, so what do you do? You're able to speak that, and your ideal client, if they were in earshot, would prick up their ears and say, hey, I think I need to listen to this person. Number 4, broad range of topics and or guests. I did this too. And by the way, I've done all of these mistakes over and over again, which is why I know that it's a mistake. I love learning lots of new things, but my topics and or guests weren't really positioned in a way that was to a specific niched audience. And you don't want to be in that position either. Off-brand podcast creators. What are podcast creators? The graphics, the cover art, the music, the tempo. You as, if you're doing your introduction, or you might have a voiceover professional that does that for you. Are they on brand? Do you know the experience that you want to create on your podcast? And are all of these podcast creatives building on that? Or are they a bit of a distraction? So these are things that are all very important. If people were to listen to your future, or if you've got a podcast already, your existing music, do they come up with the experience or how it would make them feel? That is intentionally what you wanted to do. I mean, I very much intentionally, with any of my music for my podcast, it has to have a certain beat. It has to really, set the stage. It has to be fun, dynamic, all of those different things. And I've even seen podcast guests who didn't realize that I could see them were really moving in their seat and clicking their hands and clapping their hands. And when I told them later, they were a little bit embarrassed, but I said, no, don't be embarrassed at all. But it creates that level of energy that I really want on my podcast with my guests. So everything is intentional. Number 6, uninspiring show or episode introductions. Those hosts that take forever and ever and ever to get to the point, and you're thinking, what benefit, what am I going to learn from this? If you're not sure and you don't tell them right at the beginning what they're going to learn, it's going to be very difficult for you to capture their attention. And I know for many of you, coaches and consultants, your ideal clients are busy, aren't they? And they might want to just come in, they might want to learn something. And as they're listening to you, you are continuing to build that know, like, and trust. But if you take forever to get to a topic, they may very well have gotten impatient and clicked off. So you want to make sure you capture them right at the beginning, continue that conversation in a compelling way that they cannot wait to continue to listen. And you're the first podcast that they want to listen to when you've released a new show, because they know that they're going to get value from the 20 or 30 minutes. For some of you, you might have a longer podcast as well. So that's important. And the last one is ineffective calls to action. We're going to talk about what's the best call to action coming up in another workshop. But, typically we have, subscribe to my podcast, share it with someone who may find it of benefit, leave a rating, subscribe, all of those different things. Whilst they're not bad, but there's more effective ways to get that person who may be a first-time listener off that podcast and onto your list, so that you can continue to build know, like, and trust off the list and in your community. Or because you're consistently inviting them to do so, after a little while they go, you know what, I'm going to do it. They've consistently provided real value. I can see that they're a real authority in their industry. I'm going to take that next step. You're consistently adding value. So these are the 7 mistakes. You may recognize one or more. And if you're only just in the beginning stages of your podcast, planning and seeing if this is the right move for you in your business and the right strategy, you'll have these in place so that you can tick these off to ensure that you do have all of these before you launch your podcast. So unclear or incorrect strategy, you do not want to come to a position where I interviewed someone once and they said, look, we just started a podcast and we said, we'll figure it out as we go along. And they got up to over 100 podcasts. So let's start out right and focusing on the right things so that you don't have to get to your 100+ episodes before you finally figure out a way in which to have the right strategy for your podcast. So this is the podcast positioning quadrant. And you'll notice that there's 4 quadrants there. There's an arrow going up the left-hand side, which is audience. So that is your audience, your ideal clients. And on the bottom is authority, and that is your reputation. Are you seen as that trusted authority? And we're going to go through very briefly what each of these means and what needs to be in place, or maybe not in place, that would have you fall or being ranked in that particular quadrant. So if we have a look at entertainer, this is where there's low audience and low authority. And I'm not saying that one of these is bad. You might just very well want to start a podcast to be a bit of an entertainer. There's no real audience that you're creating of like-minded people. They're just people that want to come and listen and then leave. Because, often on the show, there's a bit of entertainment there, but there's no real expertise. It's more entertainment. It's not educational. It's not empowering, but rather just pure entertainment. So, and you're not necessarily seen at all as an expert or a trusted authority. That's more the entertainer. Now, if you look at celebrity, whilst the authority is quite low, you would not hire or invest money in a celebrity quadrant here for someone to do your bookkeeping or represent you in a court of law or for health and wellness, whatever area of expertise that you're looking to invest in. However, you do particularly listen to them or someone that has a celebrity status because there's something about their personality, their charisma that is quite compelling. And so they have an audience who are able to, if you were to do a bit of an audit on them, that there are regular listeners or they have a similar core values. They just love the style. Maybe the style of the celebrity is quite controversial Or the other way, the opposite way too, is it's something that the celebrity, the charisma that's created, the listener experience that draws, that attracts, that compels a certain type of audience to listen. But again, you wouldn't hire them because they're not really seen as an expert in anything or even a trusted authority in anything either. And celebrity, this is where you probably would be able to monetize your podcast with advertisers or sponsors, because there are a certain demographic that you could say, well, these people kind of like this. But again, if you're a coach or a consultant, you're an expert, you're a specialist who is looking to leverage your podcast as a way to nurture listeners into leads and generate clients into your coaching programs and your consulting programs, then you don't want to be seen as that celebrity. You actually want to be seen as that trusted authority. So let's have a look at the third quadrant, which is expert. Now, this is where you may be sharing an episode on a particular topic, or you may invite a guest on your podcast to share a particular topic that someone is looking to learn more about. So you've done all of the right things to put together a podcast episode that gets found, and that particular person, you or your guest, is seen as that expert, provides some really great value. However, the audience may not necessarily know, like, and trust you yet, but be there just to listen. And that's the difference between being able to position yourself as an expert. But if you've got the right customer, the journey considered, you know exactly, if you get someone on your podcast and you provide real great value, the next step, the next best step that they're taking is this. And you invite them at the end of, with your call to action, which we're going to talk about in another workshop in the coming days, they will most likely take that step. And so there's things that you can create too, because I often say people come for the topic, but they'll return for the host, you, even if you are interviewing a guest. And the reason is that the way you're interviewing them with purpose, you're interviewing them with intention, the way that you hold the stage, so to speak, the way that you not overbear the guests, but the way that you come in with different questions, you add even more value to the conversation. You're able to move the conversation quickly and add your spin on it as well without overpowering, as I mentioned, your guest. That's when people go, I love the way that host managed the call, love their, you might have a sense of humor, or for some of you, it might be more dry sense of humor, whatever that works for you. Your inner brilliance really shines through. And that is why people will come back to listen to your podcast. And that's what often will happen. They'll listen to an episode and they'll say, oh, I like that. What else is this host? Oh, I'm interested in that topic. So they'll listen to that podcast episode. And then before long, they've subscribed and they've most likely binge listened to all of your episodes. That's what I hear time and time again. People come for the topic, but they return for the host, you, so that you become not just a choice, but the choice when it comes to your podcast. And then eventually the service offerings that you have too, because your podcast is a way that you've been able to journey alongside your ideal client. So becoming that trusted authority starts with you. It starts with you. So I want to now turn our attention into the you, your personal brand. And your brand is your reputation. It's what people think about you. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. If you were to ask 10 different people who've had an experience of you and who may have seen what you're sharing online, whether you're being interviewed on podcasts, whether you're doing lives, however you're communicating your brand now, if they were to be asked, let's say between 3 to 5 words on how you would describe that person. Now, if those 10 people were to say similar words to describe you, then you're on brand. But often I find that as coaches and consultants, they're not really sure about, well, what is my brand? Who am I? And when you identify who you are and you bring your own story and your journey into the content that you share, into your podcast, into your offerings, your programs, your systems, your methodologies, your IP, no one can challenge you. No one can say, you didn't do this. How can you stand and speak in that particular area? The reason why is because it's you. You've done that. So no one can challenge you about anything. Imposter syndrome just does not even come into the picture, because it is you, it's who you are, it's where you've been, and now you're sharing your expertise to your ideal client because you've been there, you've walked through that before they have, and now you've got a way through for them. So let's have a look at some of the myths and mistakes when it comes to personal branding, your message and your brand. And this is that they think it's a fad or it's unimportant. And thankfully, I don't hear this very often. We're realizing now, which is great, that people realize, coaches realize, I have to think about, well, what is my brand? How am I going to stand out from all of the other people doing the same things that I'm doing in my business? But some people, what they'll do is they may borrow from others. They may see people doing a certain thing that works really well. And because of that uncertainty and that lack of clarity for themselves, they may borrow that. And that's not good. So hopefully you don't think it's unimportant or just a fad. They confuse personal branding with a corporate brand or a corporate brand. Now, you may have a corporate brand for your business. You bring your personal brand into that. Now, your personal brand can have similar core values to your corporate brand, but remember, for those of you who are looking to build a profitable and scalable business, you will also be bringing team in to support your business. So you'll need to understand and have clarified, what is my corporate brand? What do we stand for? What's our mission, our purpose, and our vision? And so the people that you attract to your business may have their own personal brand and their own personal flavor, but they add value to your corporate brand, your coaching practice, your consulting practice, because there's similarities and they stand for what you stand for as well. But you bring, as a CEO of your business or the founder of your business, a unique, distinct personal brand, which is a blend of things, from, who you are, your mannerisms. I talk about, and I think I do talk about the distinction triad in one of the upcoming workshops, where, we talk about some key things that need to be in place that you need to be clear on, and then bring forward, bring to life, express through podcasts, through all of the other things that you do too. But don't confuse your corporate brand, your coach brand, your coaching practice brand, to your personal brand. Sure, they may align when you're probably doing many of the things yourself, but then when you bring and invite other team members in, they'll bring their own brands to your corporate brands. It'll add value. So that's important too, to be aware of. Trying to be all things to all people. I don't know about some of you, but some of us adapt really well to different situations. We're able to read people. We're able to be empathetic. We're able to influence, in the way in which we relate to people, because we're able to adapt. But there comes a time, and I've done this for, several years ago, that I thought, who am I actually? What do I stand for? What's important to me? To get clear on that, so that you can have clear boundaries in place. But when it comes to your message, having clear themes and topics that you talk about, and that you'll consistently bring to life in what you're sharing. So if you try to be all things to all people, you will water down your message, you will water down your brand. It's like, who is she today? Is she this or is she this? Or how is she going to show up today? Is she going to show up this way or that way? Get clear on what you want to stand for and how you want to stand for, which is often the authentic expression of who you are. So you do not have to put on any mask. You just show up as you. I tell you what, it's far more energizing, just showing up as you, doing you in the best way that you know how to do you, and not having to wear a mask, because that allows your energy to be up. So don't try and be all things to all people. Get clear on what that is for you, and then give yourself permission to do that every single day. Here's another one. Thinking in order to stand out, you have to be controversial. You absolutely do not. And I've got a little diagram there of some archetypes. I love my branding with archetype system, which I am licensed to bring to my clients. And one of the archetypes is maverick. And as you would know with the Maverick, they are challenging the status quo. They may drop a few words here and there, or sometimes not. The Maverick can also be controversial, or kind of helping, as a coach, helping a client have a breakthrough, because that Maverick will be there, right there, holding space. You know what it's like as a coach. You hold space for your client to step into, to have that aha. And how you do that's very different. The Maverick will kind of push a little bit more. Some Mavericks might be really vocal and drop a few, colorful words around the place. But you might have seen some people do a certain style, and then you think, well, I need to be a coach like that. No, you just need to identify what and who you are, and then be the best version of you every single day. So don't think controversy is something that you need to do, especially if you're an alchemist archetype, or an artist, or a romantic archetype. Completely different flavor, completely different experience. You've just got to identify what that is for you, and do that intentionally and consistently and constantly, because that builds a personal brand and that reputation equity. It's consistent, or clarity, consistency over time. It builds over time when you're consistent in your message. Here's something else that we often try and do, is we try and emulate what other successful people are doing. And it's only natural, right? Isn't it? Their style and what they're doing, think, oh, that works for them. I might try and adopt that a little bit into what I'm doing. Yet, what makes successful for you? It may be something that, and often is something that you have not even recognized that you do, because it's so unique and it's so authentic to you, that you don't recognize that that's something that really is your inner brilliance. You listen to what other people tell you what you should be. This is a huge mistake. I've been a personal brand strategist, even in the career industry. I would never tell someone, you need to be this or this. This is what you need to say, and this is what you need. We'll bring that out of people. We'll look at the various assessments that we use, the branding with archetypes. We look at certain keywords and things that really fit well for that client. And then we'll blend all of those things together, and it tells a story. And as that story starts to evolve, as it starts to be written, you would be reading that and thinking, this is me. This is me. It's actually putting words down to something that I've been struggling to express. That is what is really allows the personal brand to start from the inside and come out. And having other people tell you things will only confuse you, because you'll get to the stage to say, well, actually, it doesn't really fit with who I am, but they've told me this is what it's going to be like to be successful. So I'm going to have to try and put on that mask. But as a coach and a consultant, who often is working with a client, because you're bringing your story and what you've done, and the methodologies that you've used for them to be able to experience the same levels of success, because that's what they're wanting to achieve. You can't do that with a mask on, and in a way that you're being told that you have to do it. You have to bring it out in your style. But there's that clarity around, well, what is that style for me? And that's one of the areas that I love to support clients with when it comes to personal branding. And you focus, this is another one, focus on external brand components, your logos and images and graphics and things. Those are all very important, but they express the words, the experience of your personal brand. So if you're not clear on what that is yourself, how are you able then to tell your graphic designer, your photographer, your, the people that are doing your external brand, how are you able to tell them what they need to get to, and what you're looking for? And often I hear from a lot of my clients and colleagues, who are web designers and graphic designers, it's almost like we have to take out our crystal ball to try and find out what that is for our clients, because they're not sure on their brand, their personal brand. How can we get sure on that? So this is really important. You've got to understand what that expression is before you even then start to design your logo and all of the creative elements. All right, let's talk about the definition of distinguishable, uncopyable, and irresistible. Just having a look what the time is. All right, personal branding defined, as I mentioned earlier, it's your reputation. It's what people think and say about you. And by the way, your personal brand, you can enhance that. Because there's often been a debate, well, you can't impact what people think and say about you. Well, actually, I I would challenge you on that. You can by how you show up. It's the intentional things that you do. You can contribute to that. Yeah, obviously there are people out there that may not be your ideal clients, and you're not going to worry about what they think or say about you, but you can impact the people that you want to work with. Absolutely, by how you show up consistently and constantly. Your message, your brand, your offerings, this is distinguishable in that it is unique, it is set apart from your competitors. That is what distinguishable means. It's very much unique and set apart from your customers. Uncopyable when it comes to your message, your brand, and offerings, it's that it cannot be copied by your competitors because it's not their unique story and it's not your journey. Now, you would have heard me share my journey about Women in Leadership podcast, about Career Success Radio, about all of those different elements are my unique story to how I got into podcasting and the mistakes that I made. Women in Leadership podcast led me to think, what could I do with that? 2 clients that came to me for a podcast that I started to deal with started because I was dealing with grief and loss. No one else can copy that. They may be able to copy that, but I can stand with full integrity and say, this is my story. You've copied me. And so, there's aspects of your journey and your story that when you identify what they are, and we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming workshop, your markers and milestones. When you have key markers and milestones, it's going to attract the attention of your ideal client. No one else can copy it. And it's just one of the reasons that you're blending together with your personal brand and on your podcast that your ideal client will gravitate towards your content, your podcast. And then irresistible when it comes to your message, your brand and offerings is because it's totally aligned with what your ideal customer is experiencing, they're looking for, and then they cannot help but take notice of. Remember I said to you, one of the mistakes, your lucrative niche for the 7 podcast mistakes. When you understand who your ideal client is and you weave these certain things into your podcast episodes, then they can't help but take notice because you're speaking to them. It's as if you know them, you're reading their minds. But it's not that you're reading their minds. You just know what's going on for them because you've done your research and you know exactly what that is for them. So how do you go from invisible to influential, trusted authority? With these things in place, the distinction model. And you'll see there's the words. I'm not going to go into it today because tomorrow and the other subsequent days, we're going to start to unpack together what this distinction model will be for you, which is very much on your brand, very much on your message, very much on your offerings, so that when you layer a robust podcast strategy on top of that, you are going to be able to start nurturing listeners into leads from your very first episode. This is the distinction model. So all of those things intertwined, when you get them right for you, clarified for you, intentional for you, will allow you to be uncopyable. And that's what we're going to be diving into. All righty, and filling in those different areas. So let's recap day 1. How to go from a visible, underpaid coach and consultant to highly paid, sought after, trusted authority through leveraging a podcast. We are starting to fill in those gaps. We talked about 3 indicators that you're not quite ready to launch a podcast yet. We talked about 4 podcasting myths, truths. We talked about 7 podcasting mistakes. Then we talked about 7 common personal branding myths and mistakes. We talked about the definition of distinguishable, uncopyable, and irresistible. I shared with you the podcast positioning quadrant, a trusted authority, high audience, high authority. And I also just shared with you before the distinction model from invisible to influential, trusted authority. Phew, it's been a huge day. So hopefully you've taken lots of notes in your Take Action Guide. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how to transform your expertise from a want into a need, and from an overwhelming number of choices to becoming the only choice, while having a binge-worthy podcast that positions you as that trusted authority that your ideal client wants to work with and invest in. So if you're listening to the recording, you haven't accessed the Take Action Guide, industrythoughtleaderacademy.com, invisible to influential. Alrighty, now I promise to share with you the ultimate prize and what you need to do in order to be in the running for that. So there's a number of key things that you want to do every single day. So it's the Invisible to Influential Trusted Authority with a podcast 12-month acceleration program. And there are 4 stages. So each stage is a 90-day sprint. And we start off by igniting your inner champion. We're looking at your brand. We're looking at your personal brand. We're looking at your offerings. We're looking at your signature system, all of those different things. I'll talk about those a little bit later, but just wanted to give you a big overview of what you could be in the running for. Stage 2, the 90-day sprint. Idea to launch your podcast, to accelerate your authority, layer that over the top of the work that we've done with the core foundations, which is the igniting your inner champion. Then once we've launched your podcast, it doesn't just stop there, because then it's like, well, now I've got my podcast, I've got things working. How can I take that up even more further to the next level by building our legacy, or your legacy, momentum, and impact? That's the 3rd 90-day sprint that we're going to do. And then the 4th 90-day sprint is the build your legacy, scale up your influence and income. So many coaches, they try and jump. They try and get to the momentum and impact before they have built their core business foundations, which is the Ignite Your Inner Champion piece. They launch their podcast before they've gone and done that Ignite Your Inner Champion. How do you know what message to bring forward if you're not clear or certain on what that is going to be? So that is the program, step by step, holding your hand as you build that out. And it's valued at $10,000. How do you get in the winning? So you need to attend all of the training days live or watching the recording. And I want you to share your biggest aha from each day. And the way that you do that is to go to our community, podcastingwithpurpose.com/community. And there's a section you'll see, scroll down on the feed, and you'll see what was the biggest aha from day one. Write your aha there. I'm going to be checking up every day on what that is, because I want to make sure that you're winning, you're learning, and you're implementing, or will know what to implement moving forward. Bonus points if you share a selfie with your workbook and then tag me across various platforms. By the way, you can find out a little bit more about this on industrythoughtleaderacademy.com/win. /win, industrythoughtleaderacademy.com/win. Bonus points if you join the community of change makers, podcastingwithpurpose.com community. You've got to be in there anyway to share your aha. And then I'm going to announce the winner at the celebration party, which is on Friday, my Friday, which would be Thursday if you're in the US. So exciting scholarship up for grabs for one of you